Alrighty, good evening, everyone. Figured I'd go live again this evening before the start of the new week. I got a number of different things to cover tonight, and I did put out a new long-form video today on the M17, the Army's new service pistol, and I've got some legitimate concerns. Now, I have a bit of experience with the M18, and I have a number of P320s in my collection. I bought a very early iteration of the P320. I still have that Gen 1 unmodified P320. And I've had really good luck with that thus far. However, I've noticed a substantial drop in quality in Sig Sauer, and I'm not alone in this. So it's a very honest, very candid review. You get to see a lot of my personality, and a friend of mine, and there's a little bit of language in there, but we had a good time, and it was really an unfortunate revelation that we made when we took that handgun out to the range, and it didn't take a lot of rounds to determine that there were some issues. And the issues became obvious even before taking it out to the range in terms of the fit and finish, the quality control. It's not what it was. And of course we compared it to another pistol that I happened to have bought about a year ago and hadn't fired yet. And it was a night and day difference in terms of quality control from a brand that a lot of people really don't even consider carrying as an EDC gun, but they probably should. Let's pull up the live chat. Good evening, everybody. Hey, Stab and Joe, how's it going? Constitutional Carpenter, good to see you guys. Yeah, no, I don't know that the upgrade really made a whole lot of sense for a lot of people. For the turn-in to have your Gen 1 fire control group upgraded. I didn't, because at the time it was my only real carry gun, so I switched the trigger, the actual physical trigger, out to an Apex one, so there wasn't enough mass for it to be engaged, and I attempted to, I've talked about this before, tried to engage that trigger on the carpet, hidden in the back of the slide, and it was a nothing burger as far as that goes. So it was just never worth upgrading for me. So tonight, there are a number of things I wanted to talk about now that I've promoted my new video. I will likely not be posting a ton of shorts content anymore. I was really playing around with it sort of as an experiment to see how the shorts would do. I covered a number of different topics in the shorts feed, and I found that it did bring a lot of new eyes to my channel, and it did bring me some new subscribers as well, but it wasn't the same experience I was having as a creator versus posting the long form stuff. Now, I'm sure some of you don't care about this, but it's interesting if you ever think about building your own YouTube channel, because it seems that YouTube starts to reclassify where your content is distributed and who sees it. So it gets to a point where you're only really rewarded for posting shorts. So I'm going to see if I can't change that by just posting mostly long form stuff going forward. For any sort of breaking news or anything, that's why I mentioned Twitter in this as well. I'm very active there, and Twitter has a lot of pros and cons to it, which I'll get into in a bit. But I wanted to talk about one of the big elements, the big elephant in the room that a lot of people are very worried about, especially on Twitter, and that's the draft. Now, those of us who were honorably discharged or retired, whatever, we're exempt if we're retired. And I believe even the honorably discharged community is exempt as well. That veterans in totality are exempt from the draft in peacetime. Now, unfortunately, what I think is likely to happen over the next several weeks or months, especially with the border situation, we're going to find that a number of people who have allegiance to Iran or Houthis, they're likely going to do something on U.S. soil, unfortunately. And that's going to be a big rally cry for both the left and the right to put boots on the ground on Yemen. And of course, we will have a new Saddam Hussein, we're going to have a new bin Laden. They're going to basically create this. Now, the Houthis kind of brought this on themselves, honestly. They shut down the Red Sea. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that, which is a massive problem because now shipping is having to go around the Horn of Africa. So, of course, NATO can't tolerate that. A lot of countries are not going to tolerate that indefinitely because of the extra time and cost and the economic harm that it's causing the whole world right now. So, as I mentioned, unfortunately, we'll likely see an attack at home, and it will, of course, inevitably push people to want to enlist in large numbers. Now, I've mentioned on Twitter, and we've talked about it here on YouTube, that about 800 soldiers were given emergency orders to head to recruiter training school. Now, that's a pretty big deal because it was a 2-week notice. It was, hey, you're all going to recruiting school. And they weren't doing that because they thought that that would somehow increase their ability to get people. They already have a number of recruiters. They have some good recruiters. It's just that people aren't interested. The financial incentives aren't there anymore. Enough people have interacted with GWOT veterans in the communities that would normally be the ones to send their young men and women to enlist, and they see that as often not a good deal, unfortunately. So, God forbid, once something happens here on U.S. soil, you'll see a big rush, mostly of conservatives, of Southern people, who will head to these recruiting offices. The next wave, inevitably, as things deteriorate in the Middle East and deteriorate in Eastern Europe, as we know, Sweden is, of course, now telling its people to stockpile food. And there's been some food runs. I haven't delved too much into it, but it's not a good situation there. So, just exactly what you were saying there. Buy food. So keep doing what you're doing as far as that's concerned. Don't stop. Keep buying a couple extra cans and provisions and everything during the course of the week, because it's definitely going to get rockier again with the shipping meltdown, and that of course could spread to other avenues. Well, what would happen if the Panama Canal were to be shut down, right? That type of stuff. So definitely something to keep our eye on. As far as Europe, I haven't been paying nearly as much attention as I had been previously, because there's not really a ton of updates. You got Canadian Prepper, who's always constantly putting stuff out. You've got, was it NY Prepper, I want to say is the other channel. He's got some decent updates, and his are not nearly as bombastic as a lot of Canadian Prepper stuff. So if you really want to keep up on like a couple nuggets here and there, just be advised, obviously, and I'm sure a lot of you know, that the tone a lot of these channels take is very much based around how many views can they get, and they often elevate or blow things a bit out of proportion when it's simply just another chess piece moving across the board. Just hopping around my own channel here. Running this from my iPad tonight. Hey Hudson Valley, how's it going? But yeah, other than that, the other thing I wanted to hit on too, the importance and the dangers of Twitter. I've seen the value in that platform. There's been a number of channels who've been removed from this one recently, and there is a lot more ability to speak your mind over there. However, cautionary tale, because information can spread so rapidly on Twitter, it's not always accurate information. And if you're going to make your moves based on what you're seeing on Twitter, you do need to be careful, because it could definitely lead you down some interesting paths and directions. I've seen a lot of people getting pushed to views that are really ultimately not going to help the nation as of late. Some weird stuff, and some creators saying some things that, frankly, I'm a bit upset. But they would push certain essentially unfounded conspiracy theory, and I hate even to use the term conspiracy theory because we know it's a loaded term. We know it was created by the CIA, but there's really not a better term that I can think of, and some of it seems a little bit like a psychological warfare operation. When you just see the same term repeated over and over again, you begin to wonder how much of it is even AI generated. So that all being said, there is no better source for breaking news, breaking info than Twitter, because it will be posted there first. Oh, appreciate it, Hudson Valley. Thank you very much for sharing this feed, sir. So I do have some other long form stuff and some other things that I do want to work on in the near future. I've been trying to organize my thoughts. I'm sure some of you saw this legislation, and Magic Prepper made a video, I haven't watched it yet, on the attempts to go after our ability to train and even organize, potentially even run a neighborhood watch. Like if you were to train your neighborhood watch to patrol the neighborhood, that might be perceived as paramilitary training. And there are states that already have laws on the books, actually, where you do, in theory, have to be pretty careful about how you label certain activities that are clearly protected in the Constitution. So that's one to keep your eye on if there's any advancement with that legislation, because it's definitely uncomfortable to see that they're going after our First Amendment ability to organize in any fashion. Now, I will be making some more videos probably on fitness, ruck marching, those type of things as well in the near future, because I think that they are vitally important. I've also retooled, as I mentioned in my last live stream, I've retooled my civil defense concept. I think that the necessity of rifle plates couldn't be higher, to be perfectly honest. It just, again, it depends on where you are located, obviously. If you're in a more built-up area, yeah, you're definitely going to need those. And even if you're seated in a vehicle, you're definitely going to need those. I've seen a number of people on these Twitter discussions too, talking about their own physicality, knowing their limitations. Talked to a guy who was in his 70s, and he said rifle plates just aren't going to work for him. And I stressed, well, you know, you're probably not bugging out, so you should probably have them in your house. But if you do need to leave, then you can wear them in your vehicle and then just be prepared to dump them if you have to. I'm certainly not going to go rucking 20, 30 miles with rifle armor. That's just not a thing. And in fact, if I had to walk that far, my loadout's going to be very, very stripped down and very light, because I'm not, you know, an early 20-something soldier anymore. That's not a thing. And I struggled with rucking even when I was in. So the idea that I'm going to put all this stuff on and just do it without any practice is not very real. But I would really stress on coming up with a solid training regimen with everything that's going on. One other final thought, I guess, on the draft element. You know, a lot of people are saying, oh, they're disabled, they have problems, whatever. I've talked about this before too. When countries are in a desperate situation, especially to beef up the numbers in their military, they began to expand the range of draftable people. So of course that means instead of 18 to, 30 something, they're going to push that up to 55 or 65. I believe during World War II, the official draftable age range was up to 55 in the United States, though they never went that high. They could have if they'd needed to. And it also doesn't mean you won't be drafted potentially for other lines of work. If you go down the rabbit hole of the National Defense Authorization Acts, they have a lot of authority over the general population that you are not aware of in terms of their ability to push you into federal service and pay you whatever they feel is fair. Yeah, Ukraine's taken 60 plus, and I know even in the early days there were a lot of guys who probably just straight up volunteered, who were clearly my parents' age, and blew my mind for sure. And you could just tell by the way some of these people moved. You're like, eesh. So if you move like an old man right now and you're in your 40s or 50s, you may want to consider putting deadlifting on the agenda and regain that lower body strength. Just for your own quality of living, not even the draft element. But I do think that is a real concern heading into next year for a lot of folks potentially, and not just in the United States, obviously. Lately, weirdly enough, only about 64% of people on my channel who've been viewing my stuff lately are even in the US. For some of you have been, and this is one of the reasons again, I mention X, Twitter one more time. I've got it open to my right on my phone. It's pretty intriguing what's happening down at the southern border in Texas. The National Guard has taken over a few sections of the border. However, all they're doing is laying concertina wire. They are bringing some riot shields out with them, but there's not really any real direct action. They're not doing a whole lot. I'm still seeing them pull people over who are still smiling and happy, even after they were throwing stuff at the National Guard or pushing against their riot shields. Pretty disappointing to see that, especially when some areas are going to be paying, anywhere from $84,000 to $100,000+ a year to house each one of these people. If you combine the value of all of the benefits that they'll be getting from the U.S. taxpayer, it's pretty frightening and very sad to see that's what's happening when we have so many homeless veterans, so many young people struggling, which is something else too. I made a little short that didn't really go anywhere, but I know a lot of young people out there feel pretty hopeless and doomerish because everything's so expensive. School's expensive. The workforce doesn't pay any more than it paid 30-40 years ago, and people are they're hurting right now. I think that we're going to be hurting a lot more, unfortunately, even in the immediate short future. But it's really important that we engage the younger people out there and say, look, politically, there are still options for us. You can't continue voting the direction that you've been voting, or consider voting that direction maybe for the first time, because that's the ideology that put you in the situation that you're now in. So it pains me when people, conservatives especially, want to mock young people who are entering the workforce for the first time, and they're struggling and they can't figure out why the math isn't mathing, right? Rent is $1,500, $2,000 a month. Maybe their first job is paying $15 to $18 an hour out of school, and they can't really afford groceries and utilities and everything else. It's very rough. It's very rough, and even for millennials, it's rough. It's not easy. Even if you're making $40,000, $50,000 a year right now, it's a struggle. You're not saving for retirement either, which is a big thing. Those of us in the preparedness community should probably begin discussing really far out planning, because a lot of what we do is pretty long-term planning, but we don't really talk about the stuff that is unknown. Eventually, we're going to get too old. We're going to need to retire. We might have a medical emergency. Again, that's why I go back to the fitness element that nobody likes to talk about, because that is key in helping keep you healthy and staving off potentially a lot of stuff. An amazing amount of stuff can be avoided simply by having a good workout regimen. Gonna have to start stacking family units in one home. Yeah, well, no, that's exactly what's already happening, Hudson. A lot of households, unfortunately, have turned back into multi-generational living, and it shouldn't be like that in the United States. Unfortunately, we've become a lot more like Europe since 2008 in a lot of ways. Not even just legislatively, but in terms of the way our economy is working. But food in Europe, weirdly, is often a lot less expensive than here. But yeah, I know of a lot of young people who are back living at home, or in their early 30s living at home, which unfortunately makes a lot of financial sense right now. Again, it shouldn't be like that, though. We were supposed to simply, graduate from high school, right? You should be able to get a pretty decent job, enough that it should pay enough to at least handle basics. I'm not saying rich, right? But at least enough to make a car payment, food, ideally buy a house within a few years, right? all the things that a job used to do, even at the most basic entry level. Yet for some reason, everyone's fine with ragging on people who are in entry level jobs, saying, oh, you just need more skills. You just need more skills. You need to go to trade school. You need to go get a degree. If everyone's a tradesman, where's the value in being a tradesman, right? And the whole economy is not based purely on trade skills, unfortunately, either. It's mostly still a service economy in the sense that we need people to work at retail establishments. A lot of them. That is the bulk of the workforce right now. We don't have manufacturing here. That's gone. We got rid of that a long time ago. Yeah, exactly, constitutional carpenter. The trades are paying like it's 1998. And speaking of carpentry, I mean, I know that that's amongst the most, I think we talked about this before, that's one of the hardest trade skills on the body. Like the shelf life of a carpenter compared to a lot of other tradesmen tends to be a lot shorter. And even at a masterful level within the trade, you're not making very much money compared to HVAC or something else, even though literally nothing can exist without carpenters. Yeah, that's the other thing too. If you're really young, and the demographic who watches a lot of my stuff is not super young, except for the shorts, which is partly why YouTube doesn't really care about paying people to make shorts very much, because they don't have a lot of expendable cash. But if you are a young person, you stumble upon this, the trades would be good if you're really young, 18, 19, 20. Then you can work your way up, and then eventually start your own business and start, having people subcontract to do work for you. It's kind of where the money seems to be, just from putting it together, from dealing with contractors and laborers and other things in that arena. It's definitely not in doing all of it yourself. For every 100 tradesmen who retire, I would believe that, yeah, only being replaced by 14 people. Well, there's a number of factors too, as far as demographics, right? I've talked about this a little bit before, and one of the big issues, people keep saying young people don't want to work. Is that true though? Well, the bigger truth is that the boomers and Gen X did not have very many children to replace them. So part of the reason you're seeing a lot of openings is because nobody had children. The average age of the average American now is 38 years old. Going full circle back to the draft element. They're going to run out of young people who are qualified to do most military jobs really, really fast. A healthy country, a growing, developing country, would have a cumulative collective age of like the early 20s, right? Africa, for example, a lot of those countries, average age is like 23 or younger. We're going the same route as Japan, unfortunately. Which appears to be maybe part of the reason why the southern border is open, because they quite literally are thinking that, well, yeah, no, nobody had kids, but if we can get more bodies in here, maybe we can keep the gears turning for a little while longer. It's good money if you're young, under 25, top pay isn't enough to support a family. Unless you run your own business. Yeah, exactly, constitutional carpenter, 100%. 100%. And the same is true of a lot of vocations, even not necessarily stuff that people would consider to be conventional trade jobs either. But running your own business is not for everyone either, right? You're on call 24 hours a day. It's rough. It's rough, and the margins, depending on the industry, are not good either. So the becomes like a volume situation too, right? The other thing that drives me up the wall too is you see so many people pushing this idea of, oh, you got to have a side hustle. Everybody needs a side hustle. And it's all over this platform. Drives me up the wall. Oh, just drop ship, bro. If you drop ship, you'll be rich like me. Here's my Ferrari. Again, going back to the fact that an entry-level job back in the day was enough to completely handle the needs of the average person. Now I not only need to work 40 hours a week at my primary job, I need a side hustle and I need a part-time job too, right? That makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, that's exactly a constitutional carpenter. It's at the point where people gotta figure it out, and I think you're in a good line of work to at least have the work. Obviously, I know things around. If you can speak to what happened in 2008 to maybe like 2012, I know that a lot of tradesmen were really hard up as far as their ability to find any work, especially when home building ground to a halt, which is something very scary that people need to realize if they're going to just jump off into the trades, is that when the economy sags, a lot of trade skills are no longer at the level of demand that they are right now. And even though the economy's in a pit at the moment, there's a lot of people who are moving, a lot of construction still going on in a lot of areas because they simply just can no longer. They voted themselves out of Hudson Valley prepping and surviving's neighborhood. I don't even. I'm curious, Hudson Valley, how bad your property taxes are in the Hudson Valley area. I would guess that they're not. They're not great. They're probably not New York City bad, but I've seen some incredible tax rates on property in the Northeast, $14,000 to $20,000 a year just to stay in the house that you own. It's pretty wild. I'm sure someone will meme that. Yeah. What would you say that the average um, person in Dutchess County is paying for maybe like a moderate, like a 1,500 square foot ranch house on like a quarter acre? I'll tell you the big thing right now that's forcing a lot of people out of Florida or to reconsider Florida, and what's going to crush our economy in a lot of ways is the homeowner's insurance or the lack thereof. And what's really frightening is you drive around a lot of the areas that have a lot of poverty, and there are people who've been living with tarps on their roofs for years. Meanwhile, our governor is gallivanting around the United States. He was just in Iowa. I mean, my God, dude, you got to come back. You were voted in specifically to be governor, not to go campaign. But of course, the state GOP changed the laws as far as that's concerned, uh, and allowed him to hold office here because it was a violation of the state constitution for him to do what he's doing, and they changed it for him. So he got in the trades in 06, so 08, won every trade, working week, framing, trim, yeah, sheetrock, painting, roofing. Man, yeah, no, you got a really wide array of like general contracting abilities above the average Joe too, which is good. Wow, you'd say $9,000 a year in Dutchess County. Yeah, that's rough. That's rough. 4,500 in Columbia County. That is actually comparable to a number of areas in Florida potentially too. So, um, long term, I see a lot of people wanting to move here, thinking it's this great free place. Um, it's expensive. It's expensive. We do have it better than a lot of places in a lot of ways, but it's not quite what people think it is. Florida's not as Florida as people think. Could be double that in rich townships. Yeah, yeah, I believe that Hudson Valley. I just it shocks me that people are okay with paying a tax every single year on something that they own. I mean, going right back to it, it just says you don't own it. You are keeping that land together and keeping that property together for your government at that point, if you're paying any type of property tax, especially if you have paid it off, right? Yeah, it is crazy. I know Alabama, for example, they want to keep people in their home as they age. I know what a shocking notion that a lot of localities have thrown out the window. If someone has to pay $20,000 a year and they're retired in tax alone, they're not going to be able to afford their house that they paid off over 20, 30 years, right? But Alabama, you stop paying property tax at 65. I thought that was nifty. Now, if they could eliminate property tax, now we're talking. But, you know, it's a start. It's certainly a start. Yeah. Yeah, that's all we're doing, Hudson, right now is renting from the government, and it's ridiculous. Well, guys, that's about it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Unless anyone has anything else to add real quick or wants me to touch on any particular topic before I bounce. I do have a couple revolver videos in the works still. Got to get back out to the range and film those. Those will be fun. Those will be fun. I need to get some leather gear for them too. Maybe a new hat. Just something a little more lighthearted than the usual stuff, right? Well, alrighty, guys, I'm going to bounce. Wish you all the best. And keep doing what you're doing. Keep stacking. Focus on that fitness. Focus on that fitness. I'm really going to harp on that one. Take it easy, guys.